This story starts with a pleasant journey on the Salween River, but our guides are not tour operators. They're political opponents. They belong to the Karen and Karenni ethnic minorities from Burma. Both ethnic groups are fighting the Burmese junta for their rights recognition. This river, where we're now traveling illegally, has become a major stake in a deadly trans-border conflict. The Salween River still flows freely from its mouth in Tibet down to the Andaman Sea. Still, it's only a matter of time before the Salween waters flood thousands of square miles of valleys and forest. Thailand and Burma signed a deal for the construction of 3 huge hydroelectric dams. This project could turn out to be an ecological disaster. It's also going to ruin the lives of thousands of people in the area. Access to the Burmese side of the future dam site is strictly forbidden. The only way to find out what's really happening is to cross the border illegally with opposition groups. We're invited to meet the Karenni guerrillas in their headquarters on a hilltop. The Burmese army is constantly shelling that outpost from the plain, a few miles away. This war of attrition between ethnic minorities and the Burmese army has been going on for 50 years. Today, it might have taken another twist.
There's here where the sound strange as the smoke coming from the explosion over there. So from here maybe
According to persistent rumors going on for months, the Burmese army is using some kind of chemical weapon against the rebels. We decide to go and check, but we need to hurry and take advantage of a break in the Burmese shelling. The hill hit by the reported weird explosions is located on the front line. It's a network of narrow trenches connecting makeshift bunkers. Just a few Karenni rebels hold the hill. Only piles of logs can stand the 120mm Burmese shells. We're looking for signs of impact, shrapnel, or any potentially interesting samples. 15 rebels experienced strong physical pain right after a cluster of shells fell nearby. The injured guerrillas were evacuated. This man stayed. His skin still shows signs of toxic fumes, bleaching and odd marks. This young rebel also experienced toxic fumes. The 2 Karenni are ready to testify. At that moment, sentries spot a group of Burmese soldiers coming from an opposite hill. Worried for our security, the rebels give us the order to leave the position immediately.
They are near what?
They are now just near the fence. There.
Which is how many meters?
Only about 10 meters from here.
2 hours later, we're back at the headquarters. Here on higher ground, it's safer to interview the injured guerrillas. All the rebels who are evacuated have reported vomiting, dizziness and pain. Our witnesses confirm those symptoms. All the victims have also suffered and are still suffering from a general weakness.
The
These stories, which could understandably raise doubt, are backed up by two Burmese army defectors. These two teenagers, 15 and 16 years old, were forced to go to the front line. One day, fed up of being badly treated by their officers, they fled to the jungle. They were later caught by the rebels. The teenager gives us a last clue. From memory, he draws a skull, the distinctive mark stamped on the suspicious boxes. In the end, we didn't witness dramatic massacres. For fear of an international outcry, the Burmese probably avoid the massive use of chemical weapons. Still, these stories tell us it's very likely that the regular army is episodically resorting to some chemical gas, with the intention of weakening and undermining the minority's spirit. This is probably another dirty trick used in a forgotten war by a 300,000 soldier army, in the name of dictators who cling to power at all costs. These rare pictures shot during a raid on a Karenni village are tragic evidence of the many exactions committed by the Burmese army in the secrecy of the mountains. That repression hits everyone, ethnic minorities as well as political opponents, who do not yield to the Burmese generals. As a consequence of that brutal policy, a large portion of the population is thrown out in the forest or forced into exile. About 140,000 people are now refugees in Thailand. Intelligence gathered along the border confirms an intensification of the attacks against civilians in the area of the future dams. We have to go back down to the river to meet other rebels from the Karen minority. These men are determined to resist the Burmese soldiers at all costs. Once again, we want to record the Burmese exactions by ourselves. The insurgents invite us to accompany a relief mission. The objective of the Karen and Karenni joint expedition is to supply food and medicine to villages hunted by the Burmese army. The expedition leaves the Thai border and starts its journey through the Burmese mountains. For 20 days, the expedition will look for and take care of fleeing villages. For security reasons, the rebels are divided into small groups. They make their way through swamps and narrow trails. The mission's purpose is to supply relief, so strict order is given to avoid any contact and potential skirmish with the enemy. In the Burmese jungle, landmines are the deadliest threats. Landmines maim many people, such as this man, who despite a plastic prosthesis, decided to come along with the expedition. The use of landmines is part of the Burmese strategy. They terrorize the civilians and chase them away from their land. This booby trap is diffused. But how many more thousands are still concealed, waiting to maim? The expedition is getting closer to the site of the future dams. We pass through abandoned and burnt villages. A few people bravely decided not to leave. They warmly welcome the rebels. Comforted by the rebel support, they tell their tragic stories. These two young girls, 8 and 12 years old, explain that they were quietly working in the field. Burmese soldiers arrived and opened fire without warning. The younger girl was shot in the stomach, the elder in the arm. Several villages were raided a few miles around. Everybody ran away. They're hiding so deeply in the jungle that even the insurgents have difficulty to spot them to bring assistance. They send scouts through the valleys. Suddenly, a radio screams an emergency call. A young villager just stepped on a landmine.
Yes, so we have to go down very quickly.
Karen medical staff had to amputate his right leg on the spot, without an anesthetic. They saved his life. But the 16-year-old teenager lost a lot of blood. He must be evacuated as soon as possible to safer ground. Finally, hiding villagers come to meet us. They take turns to carry the victim and lead us where the local population's hiding. We come across scores of small groups scattered around in the bush. For days, they've been waiting for some kind of relief. A nurse is dressing the victim's wounds under a makeshift shelter made of leaves. The arrival of a group with a severely injured villager quickly makes its way through the valley. Everybody comes and asks for information. After stabilizing the young man's medical condition, the nurses decide to have him evacuated to the Thai border. We will learn later that he's survived the difficult journey. Men carried him for 4 days, without medicine. The refugees have now gathered in a clearing. More wounded are treated by the relief mission's medical personnel. Hours later, the patient's queue has considerably grown. Malaria is the prevalent disease in this area. Many refugees also need treatment for bad infections, fever, or just because they were deprived of food and are exhausted from endless walking. The villagers confirm that the Burmese soldiers have launched their new offensive all over the hills. About 2,000 people have settled down in this narrow valley. They're Karen or Karenni, Christian or animist. These hill minorities have always been considered as second-class citizens by the Burmese Buddhist majority. They all tell a similar story. Soldiers raided their village by surprise. They only had time to pack a few things. The Burmese looted what was left.
Selu coba tu baban bakal tu belwa. Nyam tihiu nana kapada.
In the Burmese jungle, nights can be cold. Temperatures often drop to 5 degrees Celsius. A young woman delivered a boy during the previous night in a leaves hut. She was assisted by the expedition's nurses. This baby's future seems already written. He's a Karen boy, condemned to live from day to day as hunted game, until his parents, exhausted, will decide to reach the Thai border and its hopeless refugee camps. On his first morning, the newborn baby's doing well. His parents are farmers who are peacefully living on their land. They're overwhelmed by a war they don't understand. In the camp, we collect reports of exactions committed by the Burmese. This villager explains that soldiers caught him, hit him, and then forced him to carry ammunition. One night, while the guards were sleeping, he managed to break loose and escape. Every day, new refugees reach the valley. Their stories confirm the killings, the rapes, the lootings, and the house burnings. The soldiers strictly obey the Burmese government's orders. People have to descend from the mountain and live in the plain under the army's control. The following statement confirms that it's a well-planned strategy. The strategy is obvious. The government wants to clear the area of its population and start to build the dams. The project will raise a lot of cash, but in the general's hands, they're also a weapon they can use to definitely get rid of the armed resistance. Today, Karen and Karenni minorities are still protected by the mountains. The Burmese army will launch the offensives from the plain and the main towns. As soon as the dams are operational, lines of communication will be cut off, and the entire social organization of the minorities will be broken up. Moreover, the Burmese army will be able to move quickly on the water. The last resistance pockets will be easily shut in and eliminated. One night, a Karenni rebel officer told us about his discouragement. Sooner or later, his fighters won't be able to protect their people. They're too few to counter the waves of Burmese offensives. He believes that if nobody stands up against the project, the dams will once and for all annihilate the people under his protection. In that moment, the man's thoughts go way beyond the scope of his military duties. The dams, he adds, will also destroy trees and wild animals. An entire way of living will vanish. A few weeks later, we're back on the Salween River. This time we're here legally on a Thai boat with Pierpon Ditis. This young woman is heading a non-governmental organization challenging the Trans-Border Dams project. On the Thai bank of the river, preparatory works are already completed. Here in the Wei Ji area, a 168-meter-high concrete wall will be built across the river. Work is planned to start in 2007, unless opponents can stop the project.
I believe that Thai people won't support this dam project because I'm sure that Thai people don't want to get energy or to get electricity from the blood of our friend, our neighbor.
Burmese dictators persistently show indifference to outside pressure. The only hope to stop the project with its dramatic human consequences is for Thailand to cancel its participation and thus avoid its good international name to be tarnished. Thailand has to choose between its reputation and the easy dollars from the electricity.